Start in 3, 2, 1. Guruji! Guru MG! Welcome to Y2.
Brother, thank you very much. It's always a joy to be back here at Y2 Yoga, probably the most dynamic, one of the most dynamic yoga schools that I go to teach around the world.
I'll take dynamic. We'll take dynamic.
Yeah.
You're one of my teachers. Happy that you are here. One of the things that I loved about first meeting you, it's 15 years ago, was hearing your stories and hearing how you came to start practicing yoga. Tell me if I'm misremembering, but wasn't one of your nicknames the Poser?
The Poser?
Did I make that up? Did I make that up?
You made that up, yeah.
It was something, because you started in Florida. Was it Florida?
Yeah. No, but maybe what you're thinking, not the word pose, the word posture. The first yoga teacher I ever had, after some months of getting deeper into the practice little by little, and it kind of getting sucked in very naturally, because I was like really intrigued by it. I started practicing every day, sometimes multiple times a day, different styles. Didn't matter what it was, I just went to whatever was on the schedule. So there was Bikram, there was Ashtanga, there was Shivananda, there was sweaty yoga. They had like a hot room. There was their own style of yoga, and I was just like sucking it all up. And this first teacher of mine, Paul Talicious, who became one of my best friends over the years, started calling me Posture Boy.
Ah, Posture Boy.
Yeah.
Posture Boy, okay.
It sounds better than Poser.
All right, it is better than Posture Boy.
Yeah.
But, all right, so you started with a bunch of different styles of yoga, but you gravitated towards Ashtanga.
Yeah. Yeah, it really happened not under my own plans or intentions. That same first teacher, Paul, after I was practicing maybe 6-9 months or so, kind of regularly at this multidisciplinary school, which is in South Beach, Miami Beach in the 90s. It was called Synergy Yoga.
By the way, tell everybody, when did you start practicing yoga?
I started in the 90s, and because that same little studio there in South Beach was on a little street called Española Way, and I had a boutique with a girlfriend at the time, a clothing boutique, because she was a designer. And so it was on the same block, so yoga people used to come into the shop to check out clothes and try on clothes and stuff. And I didn't know anything about yoga. And I started to talk to some of the people that would come in regularly, and they would tell me like, oh yeah, we do, like, I'm like, what do you do? Like, what is this yoga like? And they started telling me we do things like dog pose, and I'm like, what? What the fuck is dog pose? And she showed me, she got down on the floor in the boutique and she was showing me up dog and down dog, and I'm looking at her going, that doesn't look anything like a dog. What this really is all about. But then one afternoon I was in the shop, and one of my party buddies was walking by the front of the boutique. I saw him through the glass with this thing over his shoulder, which was a yoga mat. I didn't understand at the time, but it was a yoga mat. And I opened the door and I said, Alfred, where are you going? He's like, I'm going to yoga. I'm like, you do yoga? He's like, yeah, there's lots of cute girls. So it got my attention. But after practicing for a while there, and kind of getting good at the postures, and my friends started calling me Posture Boy, he says to me one day, hey, MG, you're an Ashtangi. You should be practicing Ashtanga every day. And I said, well, I can't, because we only have Ashtanga on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And he says, no, you knucklehead. You go somewhere else and practice at an Ashtanga community. There's a studio on the other side of the beach that is a student of Patabi Joyce. They just do Ashtanga every day, and you'll be practicing Ashtanga. And it never occurred to me anything like that, because this is the only place I'd ever done yoga, and they had all the different styles, and it was fine to me. And he said, no, you should be doing Ashtanga, just Ashtanga. So he kind of kicked me out of the nest. You know, I wasn't expecting it. So I went to the other side of town, and I'd heard scary stories about people that are just hardcore Ashtanga practitioners. And then I went, and I became exactly what I was afraid of.
A hardcore practitioner?
A hardcore Ashtanga only practitioner. It was a gradual process, but yeah, that's the path I got led down. So.
And how long did you practice Ashtanga before you made your first pilgrimage to Mysore?
Well, the first time I ever went to India was before yoga, and I hated it. I had a horrible experience. I got so sick. I was projectile vomiting had to have a doctor come to my room, and he put an IV hanging from the ceiling fan in my room to give me an IV and an injection of antibiotics because my liver was like swollen. He's like, here, put your hand here. You feel that? I'm like, yeah, you shouldn't be feeling that. That is your liver. So I'm like, fuck. He goes, you are not traveling tomorrow. You saying you have a flight tomorrow? I said, yeah, I'm going to Nepal tomorrow. And he's like, that's possible. So he treats me, and then like once my fever came down and I stopped vomiting and everything, I was like, we're leaving here tomorrow no matter what. If I have to like go in a wheelchair to get on the plane, I'm getting the hell out of India and I'm never coming back. Well, obviously I came back. After I got into yoga, I went back. It was a whole different vibe, a whole different experience. But to answer your question, I was probably practicing maybe 2 years before I went to India. But I met Pattabhi Jois before that, probably about after a year and a half of practicing. He was on tour in Europe, and I went with a group of the Ashtanga community in Miami Beach. We went over to France for 2 weeks and spent 2 weeks with Pattabhi Jois and Sharat, who was with him at the time.
And for those that don't know who Pattabhi Jois is, who is Pattabhi Jois?
Yeah, Pattabhi Jois is our late guru, and I guess you can say the original guru of the Ashtanga Vinyasa Yoga system from Mysore, India, who is a direct disciple of Krishnamacharya, who is kind of looked at as the godfather of all modern yoga, asana, Iyengar, and Desikacharya's yoga, and as well as Ashtanga. So Pattabhi Jois spent many, many years practicing with Krishnamacharya before he started teaching just Ashtanga on his own in Mysore, South India. That's where everybody goes that wants to go to practice Ashtanga with the source in Karnataka, the state in South India. So I met him in France and practiced with him for 2 weeks, and it was really exciting, and it was very intriguing to see an international yoga community as well, because before that I was only practicing in Miami Beach, and I met him, and there was people from Italy and Spain and France and Scandinavia and Germany and Austria and Switzerland, like from all around Europe were there, Finland, all that time practicing with them. So I was like, wow, this is really big, all these people from around the world. And of course, most of the people that were there are people that would go to Mysore and practice with him, and then so they took advantage of an opportunity to see him when he was coming over to Europe.
And he was still in the original Shala when you started practicing. How many people did that fit?
I was fortunate to spend 3 visits over the course of 3 years practicing with him in his original Shala, which was big enough for about 8 of us to practice comfortably.
8?
Yeah, but every morning at 4:30 a.m., 12 of us would squeeze in there. So it's very tight. This is where this idea that most people in yoga know that like there's a difference when you look at a yoga studio or Shala, like how many people it can fit. And there's like, oh, you can fit this many people, or if it's Ashtanga, it can fit this many more.
Right.
Because Ashtanga has this reputation of getting people practicing tight, close together. And that comes from that original Shala in Mysore, in the neighborhood of Lakshmipuram, where his house was for many, many decades with him and his family. So they converted one of the ground floor rooms into the yoga shala, and it was very simple. There was no really any windows in the room. Outside the door of the room was the entrance and a stairway that had a very small window, but it was pretty much enclosed, and it was hot as fuck. Of course, you didn't need to heat the room, and it was in South India, so it was always sweaty, always super humid, and we were like right up against each other, so you're rubbing up against each other's arms and legs, half the time, depending on the pose, your legs or arms going onto the other mat, or you're right up against the wall practicing like this if you were in one of the corners. If you were in the corner, not just on the side, you were like, the wall was in front of you here and here, so you had to kind of adapt your movements accordingly. There was 2 rugs on the floor, so because they didn't have a rug that was the size of the actual room, they had 2 that went more than half the size, so one overlapped the other, and they had those kind of like ribbing on the edges of it, so if you were practicing in those spaces, your mat would have this like big bump like right through some part of it all along it, so you had to...
So you're saying it was fancy?
It was fancy, yeah, it was fancy. It was India fancy, yeah. But the energy was amazing, you know, the sweat and the breath and the heat. And, you know, for many, many decades, Patabi Joyce was in that room, in that space, you know, teaching us and many people that came for many years before us. And then, and Sharat started teaching him, with him alongside his, you know, in that space when Sharat, you know, went from the idea of studying, you know, to then kind of growing by his grandfather's side. And then eventually that led to him kind of taking the Astronger torch, you know, many, many years later.
Now, you've told me this before. So Patabi Joyce, I guess, if it started at 4:30, he'd wake up at 3:30.
Yeah, and probably earlier, because what would happen is Sharat would do his practice still. His grandfather would say, like, you have to do your practice. If you want to assist me and teach with me, you have to do your practice first. So Sharat was practicing like from 2:30 to 4, and then they would come over to open the door for us. Because in those times when we were practicing in that original shala, in that original house, they were already living in a different neighborhood. He just didn't have a shala that he had built some years later. So they would drive. So the first group of us, you know, 10 or 12 of us would be there waiting to go in the dark. It's like still nighttime. So, and then we'd finally like hear a car coming from around the corner, and then the car would come around the corner, they would pull in. They would go in the front door. We would be waiting by the side door, going right into the room beside the shala. They'd open the door, we'd go in and we would start practicing on our own. And right in the next room from where we were practicing, there was a little tiny kitchen, a little Indian style kitchen. Again, no windows, and we could hear them in there clanking around making coffee. So the first half an hour or so they were in there making coffee with the newspapers. And then he would come in at 5 and chant. So we would all stop. He'd walk in, stumble in, Samastitihi, and oh, and we would chant the invocation of Patanjali with him, and then we continue. And then he would start adjusting us. One of the magical things about practicing in that original space is that because it was so tight and so small, and 12 of us, you know, even though he was like in his 80s, he could move around just a couple steps in any direction to be able to have access to everybody. And then when him and Sharat were both in the room at the same time, it was double energy of them both assisting and adjusting. And very different than 3 years later when they built their big home with the ground floor yoga shala in Gokulam, another more fancy, newer neighborhood, which could fit 90 people, you know, all practicing. So very different. Him walking from one side of that space to the other to kind of get to somebody. So there was much less attention, and, you know, 90 people practicing at a time as opposed to 12, very different experience. So
yeah, and he would teach from 4:30 until what time?
it depends. In the high seasons, when there was many, many people coming, usually December, January, February, March, April, he could be teaching till like 2:30 in the afternoon. And it would just be like one by one by one by one, you know. Somebody would finish, he would drop them back, their back bends, scrunch them in Paschimottanasana, and he'd say, okay, upstairs you go, finishing. And then one more, and the next person would walk in and start their practice. So one by one, you know, the students would filter through and go up, and he would be there doing it until everybody was done.
You did a really good impersonation of Patabi. You used to tell me a story about him falling asleep in the chair in the corner.
Oh yeah.
Tell
Yeah.
that.
Well, because he was getting up so early and doing this every day and starting to get a little bit old, he had a little stool, literally a stool, right in the corner at the entrance that we were walking. If you step into the room and you're right there in the space, like from the doorway, like a half a step is where the back of the mat of whoever was practicing in that space. And he would be sitting in a stool right back in the corner. Sometimes he would go sit down and he would be there watching and seeing what's going on, and then he'd get up and kind of hobble over to give somebody an adjustment and go around for a while, and then when he found a moment he could go take a break again, he would come sit down. And sometimes he was sitting down in the stool, he would start to kind of go like this. His head go against the wall. He'd be here. We'd see him teach, and nobody would say, Guruji, wake up, you know, somebody needs help, or can you give me an assist? He would be there until all of a sudden he'd look around, you know, like, I'm good, nothing happened, you know, and then he would eventually get up and start moving around again, so.
And how you said you did that? You were able to make it there 3 times?
3 times in that original shala, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, from 2 months to 6 months each visit.
And over what period of time? Was that 3 consecutive
3
years?
3 years, yeah.
3 consecutive
Yeah.
years. And for those that don't know, there's 6 series, right?
Yeah.
There's 6 series. Most practitioners practice first series. How long before you moved on to second series?
Well, I was a unique case in that sense.
You were a posture boy.
I was posture. No, but it wasn't because of that. It was more because of this, the loss of power, maybe. I was fortunate because I was already like hardcore and deep into the practice before I met him the first time, and because I met him the first time in France, as opposed to in Mysore, he seemed to have been maybe handling the way he was working with people a little differently, because even that first trip in France for me was very special because there was about 30 to 40 of us only there with him during that trip. And he was teaching Mysore in the mornings, and then a couple times during the trip he counted the vinyasa, and a couple times he taught second series, which back then wasn't even something he was doing in Mysore. He wasn't doing guided classes at all at Mysore, just Mysore self-practice style, because in Mysore, India, where his home in the shala was not big enough for guided classes. He didn't start doing that until years later when he made the big shala, when he could fit 90 people at a time. Then he started counting the vinyasa. So while we were with him in France doing Mysore, there were so few of us, and it was again him and Sharat together, so they were all over us. We had lots of hands-on attention. And then when he was counting and guiding the class, he decided who could come to second series class based on what he saw in their practice. And so he invited me, Michael, tomorrow you come, we are doing second series. I said, oh, cool. So I was practicing second series at home in Miami Beach, but not like I had lots of holes and lots of work still. And so when I came to Mysore at the end of that same year, we were in France, in Paris, and in Lille in the north, in maybe August, September, and then I went to meet him the first time in January in Mysore. So he knew me. It hadn't been long. He remembered me. And he invited me to come to the first group in the morning, which was another thing that got me into trouble with the Ashtanga community. It's a different story. And then he was like, after me practicing primary series for a couple weeks, he started telling me, okay, Pashasana, you start doing the next pose. And then slowly he would watch me and have me doing the poses, because he was already working with me in those poses in France. So. And it was unique, as I said, because if you're just going with him in Mysore, the process was a little different and a little slower. So, if you're a newer student there, you have to practice primary for at least a month for them to see you and get to know you. And then, depending on where your practice is, he would start to let you start to go little by little and adding things on. So I kind of got to skip that process.
Little J.
Yes.
Come switch.
Okay.
I think it would be cool for you guys to share, because things evolved.
Yes.
From how Gannon was able to be indoctrinated into the Ashtanga community and his experience versus yours. Here.
Okay. And this is a photo of Lakshmi Puram when I met Michael in India.
Oh, that's
So I sent it
cool.
to you. You can add it to the thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
In front of the house, yeah?
Yeah.
I remember that photo. Oh, let me see how beautiful and young we look.
Okay, what are we talking about, Tanner? I couldn't.
Michael was talking about his introduction to second series very early on, and so just how the Ashtanga kind of evolved and how like the tradition sort of like changed over time. I mean, to incorporate more people, obviously.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Jake, like maybe just talk a little bit about when you went over to India and compare and contrast.
Sure. Michael, did you have to, your first visit? I remember talking to someone who'd been once before. She was an Iyengar student and had studied with BKS Iyengar, didn't love Ashtanga, and so had to go investigate more. And she went, and she's the one that kind of, because this was before the day and age of, these cell phones and this
Right.
like smartphones. So word of mouth was how we found out about how to do such things. I had to write a letter to Guruji, "Dear Honorable Sir, may I please have the pleasure of studying with you?" And I named the dates and the times that I was going, and never heard back from him. And just bought the plane ticket, decided to go there that long. I arrived at his house, and he was like, "Oh, did you write me a letter?" I was like, "I sure did." And he pulled this ledger out from a million ledgers. Went halfway through this ledger, found my name, and there were many, many names before and after mine. And he was like, "Oh, yes, here you are. Good. You come tomorrow morning, 6 a.m. or 6:15 a.m." And I did. And it was like that. And there were this was the Guruji's new Shala, Pattabhi Jois's new Shala, which held the 90 people you said. I think I was there June, July, and August. I think there were maybe 40 people there, if that many. And that was the day and age people lived there, and you could live there
Right.
year round and study year round rather than seasons.
Right.
Yeah. Did you have that experience with him?
Well, the letter thing was going on before that. In my observation of this is that started for no other reason than Guruji liked to receive mail from students, fans from all around the world. If you remember we would sit with him in conference on once a week in his space, that same space. Originally we did conference in the entrance area, the kind of the vestibule living room area of that old house in Lakshmipuram. Many students would come and be all hanging out there until he would come and show up and open the door, and he would sit down in a chair, and he would have his stack of mail and the newspaper, and he would sit there and be looking at his mail. Everybody was around there sitting with us, just kind of looking at him, kind of like soaking up the energy and the vibe, and chit-chatting a little bit with each other in the room. But they were all there like it was like satsang, or like just being at the feet of the guru, if you will. But it wasn't kind of any structure like, today we are going to talk about life or practice or the gunas or ahimsa. He was just there, sitting there, and all we started with him just going through his mail, while we're sitting there, and reading the paper, and then at some point when he felt like, okay, I've sat here and ignored them for long enough, he would put it down. He would go, "What news?" And somebody would say something, and we'd start chatting, and people would start to ask stupid questions about dristis and poses and diet and things. And he, in his limited English, his broken English, would give answers to things. And if it was just him there, the discussion was pretty shallow because of his level of English. But the times that there would be somebody else there, sometimes Sharat, or sometimes his banker, one of his dear, very close friends, which was his banker, somebody that could speak both Kannada, the language they speak in the state of Karnataka, as well as English, would kind of translate some things that Guruji would share. Sometimes maybe they would elaborate on the question that somebody's asking in English, but most people are accustomed to asking a question very simple because they knew of his understanding, and he would answer. He would maybe say something very brief in English about it, and then he would turn to his friend and he would start going, explaining something, and then his friend or Sharat would express what he said, and Guruji would listen and explain it, and then he'd pick up on some word in English that he and they would repeat those words, that, what he's saying. So it was always nice when somebody was there that could kind of be a translator for us. But I can't remember the point I was going to make when So he'd have all his mail, and sometimes he'd go, oh, Lino is coming, or oh, Johnna is coming, or oh, Michael's, or Eddie's, he would say, oh, here's one letter from California. Who is this? I am not knowing this student. Who, you know this student? You're California. You know this student? Yes, Guruji. This person is somebody from this city. Okay, very good. So, I think this started because he just liked to receive mail, and many people send letters and get there and say, Guruji, you get my letter? No, I didn't see your letter. I sent you a letter, okay? And many people that didn't send letter would say, Guruji, I sent you a letter, you get my letter? No, I didn't see your letter. Or, yes, I think I am seeing your letter. And so, you were supposed to send a letter, and if you sent a letter, he may see it, he may not see it. If you didn't send a letter, and you're telling me to send a letter, it's fine. And you can just say, yes, of course I sent you a letter, Guruji. You didn't get it? Mail India system, very bad. Or from America, or from Europe, whatever it is. Very far, very long time. Maybe sometimes letters are coming after students are going. So, these kind of things. And even if you were honest and said, no, Guruji, I didn't send you a letter. Okay, no problem. Next time you're sending a letter.
Very cute.
Yeah.
Very cute. Yeah. I remember there weren't a lot of students in the room, but like I knew primary series, I practiced primary series the whole time. That was 2004, and Sharat was in the room assisting, and then he would have his own kind of shala situation happening after him assisting Guruji. I got a lot of backbend assist, but really nothing else, and I didn't get moved forward any. It was a good experience. I was there for a few months.
That first visit. And that's when we met in 2004?
I met you I decided then in 2004 I would go every other year.
Okay.
And so I didn't want to go every year. I had the other things that I was taking care of. So I went in 2006 and I spent a month there, and then I had a retreat of people come at the end of that month. And that's when I met you.
Okay, 2006, wow, okay. 19 years ago.
Many years.
Very good.
Yeah. I was practicing with Guruji, and I came out one day of practice, and I guess I was meeting up with the people that I had brought on retreat, and there was like 20 of them, I think, and there was maybe 6 or 7 that came up to me dragging you in tow. Johnna, have you met Michael Gannon? This is Michael Gannon. Have you met? He's got videos, and we need to bring him to Charlotte. And that was the.
So these were people from your group.
These were people from the group, and you and I became fast friends.
Yeah.
You took me. Lino was there too, and we had dinner a few times with Lino. And you took me to Lakshmi Puram to see the old shala, and then I brought you to Charlotte, and like the rest is history.
Yeah, that's good. I'm glad those students connected us.
They sure did.
It's been a long, beautiful friendship so far. And I look forward to many, many years.
So far. It's true. So Tanner wanted to mention about the practice changing. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, whatever the answer is, I think it's inevitable. Like any art, over long periods of time is destined to evolve. And when things like that happens to an art that's so long-standing, some people like those changes, some people don't like those changes. For some people, maybe they feel that those changes serve them and their idea or understanding of a practice, and some people think that maybe it doesn't serve them and their ideas and understanding of the practice. I can say that it's same but different. Like Tantra, one of the things I learned from you, Johnna, you said like Tantra is like any kind of element or device or thing, the word device, that can make your life better, fuller, richer. And I remember you saying like, this thing can be a tantric, tool, a tantric device. So like I struggle, there's a lot of things about technology in today's day and age that I think, wow, this is really great for life experience, for myself and for our children. And there's a lot of things that I think, this sucks, and it's not such a good experience for my current life experience and for my children. But you can't stop it. Things are going to evolve, things are going to change. And I think the same thing happens in things like martial arts and yoga. And so Ashtanga is no different in that sense. You can watch if you look back at how the process, the progression, and the way things changed in the Ashtanga world, early years with Guruji, later years with Guruji, the last years with Guruji, the years where Guruji and Sharat were both very much involved, the years before Guruji left where Sharat was much more involved as Guruji was starting to get really up there in years. The years where there was lots of different Ashtanga police, if you will, poking their noses into the family business, we can call like the Joyce family business, thinking that they knew what was best, or they say, you should do this, or you should do that, or you shouldn't let this, or you shouldn't let that, or you should change this, you should change that. And so you see changes based on those kinds of external influences. And
are you saying
course,
right there that you saw changes to how it was done being made based on communication that was happening back then?
Well, I guess I can't say unequivocally if changes were made based on that influence, but I definitely saw that influence happening, and I heard it happening. And I was in some of the more intimate gatherings around Punjabi Joyce when things would come up.
Can you give an example? And maybe this doesn't even make the cut. I'm curious.
Yeah.
Maybe we talk later.
Yeah.
And by changes, maybe we should define what we're talking about for those who don't.
Well, for example,
Let's make this interesting.
Yeah. No, I've had these discussions before, and most times they're in like intimate training groups, not like a podcast environment. But over the years there was many things and these types of elements that came out in even a much broader public market, like the Vanity Fair article that came out many years ago, which I don't know how, but my name was mentioned in that article. I don't know if you remember. And all the documentaries that were done over the years around Ashtanga, Enlighten Up, and the other ones like that. And but like when some systems that were in the Ashtanga world would start to grow beyond just the Ashtanga world, some people thought that was incongruent. Like, you're either fully immersed in the Ashtanga world or you're in something else. And it's fine for somebody to have that perspective, feels me, for themselves, if they would say, you know what, if I'm going to do Ashtanga, I'm going to do Ashtanga and teach only Ashtanga. I'm not going to do anything else or teach anything else, or feel that, I want to practice Ashtanga, but I teach something else, or vice versa. That's fine for them as well. And I don't think either of those camps need to force their ideas on anybody else other than themselves, or the community that's around them, that they could call them their students. Like, okay, if you're going to practice with me, this is my experience, this is the way I share it, and that's the way you have to fall in. And then people can say, oh yeah, I agree with that, or not, or they go do something else. So these things started to happen. These are the kinds of things I started to see. So, for example, this is all old stuff, so it's not like I'm going to say anything that's controversial.
Please do that.
The Jiva Mukti world, for example. David Life and Sharon Gannon, we were not married, just have the same name. They were very, very dear, close students of Pattabhi Joyce for a long, long time. And they created Jiva Mukti Yoga in New York, which became one of the most really famous yoga schools back in the day. There wasn't so many epic yoga schools like that around the world. But their primary asana practice was Ashtanga with Pattabhi Joyce. But they had kind of like a guru trilogy, so their asana learnings and understandings came from their asana practice of Ashtanga with Pattabhi Joyce, and they had two other gurus that, one was very Sanskrit and mantra based, which is where they kind of were one of the pioneers in this area of using music along with their asana classes, and the third was Swamiji Nimalanda from B.R. Hills, where I used to go spend time at his ashram with Swami Brahmadeo, who was his successor. So they combined those three things to create the pillars of Jiva Mukti Yoga, which was like the music and the teachings, the philosophy, and animal rights and vegetarianism, and the intensity of yoga with Ashtanga, the Astra. But they created their own sequencing by combining those things. Just like any other type of vinyasa-based practice. I like to remind people as they're learning about all types of vinyasa yogas that the original vinyasa system is the Ashtanga vinyasa system. This is something that we'll discuss in greater detail on Sunday in the class we do here at Y2 Yoga, the original vinyasa system, and when we do the Ashtanga full vinyasa practice. So a lot of people think like, oh, there's vinyasa, all kinds of vinyasa classes, and there's also Ashtanga vinyasa as well, but they don't realize that the original vinyasa system was the Ashtanga vinyasa system, and then all the things that came after that, like Jiva Mukti Yoga and Rocket Yoga and Flow Yoga and Om Yoga and Chandra Yoga and Shiva, all the different things were kind of extensions, enhancements, changes of the original vinyasa system of Ashtanga. So Jiva Mukti was one of the pioneers in that area, and Guruji, as a very old Indian Brahmin who loved to see the students every year that came and loved to see them when he was traveling around the world, he didn't really have any ideas to control anybody and tell them what they should and shouldn't do, other than in the moment when they were on the mat, during their practice. So there's people coming from all over the world that had schools in all different disciplines. And maybe they liked to do Ashtanga, or maybe they wanted to go meet Pattabhi Jois, or they wanted to go see Mysore and see what's going on. Why is this system growing so much? And he never made anybody have to profess to him or to the practice in any way. He was just sharing it. But the external influences that I was kind of speaking of, some people thought that maybe it should be different. So he knew somebody like Sharon and David, like many, many others, is students of his that he adored, and they appreciated him and his practice, and they would come and learn from him, and they were teaching Ashtanga when they went back home to wherever they were around the world. And it's not that he needed to know that that was the only thing that they were doing. But one day, in a meeting, a small gathering, with Guruji in the room, and maybe a half a dozen or a dozen other people, some family, Indians, but foreigners and students from around the show. I don't know what happened, what the discussion was that came up, and somebody said something about not correct method, and because Guruji would say, oh, not correct method, you're not doing the poses right, or you're not doing the vinyasa right, that's not correct method. And this idea kind of got taken and elaborated like to anybody that was kind of disrespecting the Ashtanga system, not doing it the way that it's meant to be done. And so somebody made a comment that Sherry, because Sharon to him was Sherry and David were not teaching correct method. And they kind of used that expression, and he's like, what do you mean? No, they are not doing, they have Ashtanga, but they also are teaching this other system, their own system that they are making. And he was confused, because he just knew them as like the students Ashtanga, but it was being presented to him as like they were kind of like snubbing him in some way. So in like his understanding of the things, wasn't to the point where somebody would kind of in a fair way explain to him, like, yes, David and Sharon are teaching Ashtanga the way that you taught them. David Life was certified by you, and he's teaching Mysore, and he has, other advanced practitioners that have come and practiced with you that are teaching Mysore Ashtanga the way it is. But they also have this big school with many, many people that are not practicing Ashtanga, and they come and do what is called Jiva Mukti Yoga, which is music and these type of asana sequences, and they teach about vegetarianism and philosophy and yoga and all these things. They are having both of these things. It just got presented as kind of like, oh, they're not doing the correct method. So this got back to Sharon and David that Guruji felt whatever, like surprised or didn't understand what was going on. So they themselves decided that, okay, we don't want to be disrespectful in any way to our Guru, Pattabhi Jois, and at the same time, this Jiva Mukti thing that we've created is inspired by Ashtanga, but this is our life's work, and this is what we're going to continue to do. So they made a decision to stop the Ashtanga program at their Jivamukti New York school, and just be more focused on the Jivamukti system, their practice, their classes, and their schools, and their trainings. Their training was very popular. Lots of people would come from around the world to learn that training from them. It was a very deep, rich training. And so they stopped doing Ashtanga because of that. So it's kind of like they were put in a position because of external influence that made them have to make that choice that they thought was best for everybody. So that's an example of that. And when that announcement was made, there was another ruckus because there was lots of Ashtanga teachers, guided as well as Mysore style, that were all of a sudden displaced from a job. And so people started saying, oh, Jivamukti is firing all their teachers because they're not doing Ashtanga anymore. That's terrible. That's not nice. And so just kind of yoga politics, yoga drama.
Human drama, human politics.
Yeah.
No matter you practice yoga or not.
Exactly, yeah.
That's funny when Tanner said, talk about like how things changed. We took it two different ways. Like I took it how some people are saying the sequence of Ashtanga has changed and how it's taught has changed over the years. And you took it to, oh wait, Ashtanga begat these other systems a little bit.
Yes.
Yeah, interesting.
And the point you say something about the sequence changing over the years, I think that's inevitable as well, because the way Guruji learned it from Krishnamacharya, the way he explains to us is different the way he was teaching it, and then there was different things that changed in the sequence, poses moving to different places, and he used to tell stories how he learned full vinyasa, the full form,
which you're teaching on Sunday
here. Which I'm teaching on Sunday, yeah. Which I embraced with all my time with Lino Miele, because he's the one that kind of uncovered the full vinyasa system with Patabi Joyce years ago. Nobody understood, nobody knew that it existed. And then when I started spending lots of time with Lino, as much time as I was spending with Guruji each year, I was spending with Lino, because I wasn't doing anything else with my life. I didn't have so many businesses and so many kids and things, so it was easier for me to be just moving around the world. About 10 months of the year I was moving around for either practicing or teaching yoga, and the other 2 months I was in my little studio apartment in South Beach, Miami. But he learned full vinyasa from Krishnamacharya, and he told us that Krishnamacharya used to test him and Amaji, Guruji's late wife at the time. She died many years before him, but he said that Krishnamacharya would have them stand in samastitihi on their mat, and he would say two things. He would say the name of a pose and a number in Sanskrit, representing the vinyasa of that pose. And so he would say like Trikonasana Chatwari, and they would have to go right into that position, what it is. And then he would say Pashasana Sapta, and they would have to go to the floor in that position. And he would say Marichasana Di Shat, and they would have to go into that position. So they had to understand the science of the vinyasa system very clearly. Like if a conductor was calling out somewhere in the sheet music, or a choreographer was telling you somewhere to go in the choreography of the dance, you had to understand the system, understand the practice like a science. That's something that changed because people just started going through the motions. He was just teaching people without having them really have to learn the vinyasas. And then eventually some people started to kind of dive deep and dig into it. Because he wrote in his book, Yogamala, that was written long time ago in Kannada, his native tongue in India, that none of us could read until years later when it was translated by Eddie Stern from New York and some others that spent the time actually translating it into English. But even though when we couldn't read it in English, the way it was written was very unclear and confusing, and he would say things like the state of the asana in Surya Namaskara B is 7 and 14, and it wasn't clear at all. Very different, like the book Ashtanga Yoga Made Simple by Michael Gannon says, 1, ekam, inhale, arms up. 2, dvi, exhale, bow down. the way that the Western mind needs to understand something to be able to go deep into it and perfect it.
Yeah, I remember having to take notes and backtrack my notes reading Yogamala and trying to decipher exactly what it meant. And once I did all of that, of course, I could make sense of it,
Yeah.
but it took a lot more effort than Michael Gannon's book. Yes.
Yeah.
So, okay, very good. The whole changing of the system.
Yeah.
Going from full vinyasa now then to what we would call half vinyasa.
No.
What do you call?
Did you say that on purpose?
Yeah.
She's throwing me a softball. No, I don't like this idea of half vinyasa. It's understandable why somebody would say half vinyasa. But if we understand the meaning of vinyasa, vinyasa means?
Breathing, moving system.
Yeah, breathing, moving system refers to the breath and movement, the combination of those two things. So show me a half of vinyasa. Like, how do you make a half a breath and a half a movement? You can't. So full vinyasa would mean doing the full form, like all 9 or 14 or 5 or 22 vinyasas of the pose. And that means you start the pose in Samastitihi, you go through the first part of the sun salutation to get to the floor. For example, if it's a seated pose, you do that pose, or you do both sides of that pose with the jump back if it's a two-sided pose, and then you come back to Samastitihi, finishing back to 0. So that would be the full form. And you would also be doing the correct vinyasa for each of those vinyasas. So you have to know what it is. You have to know what the breath and movement is. It's like knowing the music or knowing the choreography. Whereas if you're doing the more contemporary way that we've been doing it for a long, long time now, that's not full vinyasa. It's what I call in sequence, where we take poses and we put them together in sequence. When they're taken apart in their entirety, starting and finishing in Samastitihi, what we're doing in sequence, once we get to the floor, we stay on the floor. We don't come back to Samastitihi. So anytime you would finish a pose from the floor, after you're in down dog and you come back to standing, you're doing 4 more vinyasas before you're ready to start in the next pose, and you're doing 6 more vinyasas to get back to sitting on the floor again. So we shave off those last 4 vinyasas, we shave off those first 6 vinyasas, because we put things together in a sequence. So poses get sandwiched together. So
We are really nerding out on
Yeah,
Ashtanga
exactly.
yoga right now.
And this is only for the people that are
Super
understand
geeks
Ashtanga.
like this.
So it made the practice much shorter, much less breath, much less movement.
When do you think he changed that?
When or why?
When? And then why?
I don't know when it was exactly,
And
but
Guruji changed that.
yeah, Guruji changed it. The why, I've heard him say that full vinyasa very hard on the heart. Okay, so if maybe he felt that people were coming and it was too much for them to deal with all that up and down, and maybe it was when there started to become more people coming, the practice was longer, and so it took more time, and he was like, what, I can expedite this a little bit so I don't have to work so much, work so many hours, or make the practice shorter for people, for whatever it was. But I also know how it came to be that we realized that after he was doing for a long, long time in sequence, how we come to know that there was a fuller form, which is the full form of the full vinyasa. And that's because Lino, who had been to India practicing with him and was on tour with him in Europe, and started to pay attention to the way that he was counting the vinyasa in Sanskrit. So Lino understood the numbers, ikam, dui, trini, chatwari, pancha, how to count in Sanskrit. And when Guruji was counting the poses, he would do ikam inhale, dui exhale, trini inhale, chatwari exhale. And you would follow along through the sequence based on his rhythm and his count. But nobody really knew what those numbers represented, because there was never a book or a manual or something explaining, there's 22 here, there's 13 here, there's 16 here. They were just, he would say, you do this, do that, move here. But even when he was teaching somebody in the Mysore room, he would spit out the vinyasas by the name of the number, because that's how he knew it. So when he wanted somebody to go in the chaturanga, 4-limb staff pose, in a low push-up, he would call it chatwari, which is the number for 4. he wouldn't say chaturanga. Sometimes he would chaturanga, but most time he'd say chitwari. Go to chitwari. Go to chitwari. It's like a dance choreographer saying go to the second position or the first position. Or the conductor saying, let's go to the coda, or let's go to the return. You know, he would call somewhere. Or the eighth measure. That's how he knew the sequence. But the students didn't. So he'd be saying that, and then he'd have to clarify what he meant because of the way that Krishnamacharya taught him. And he used to say, if I got it wrong, or it took me too much time to get to the position, my guru was hitting me. So
The good old days.
the Indian way, yeah. But Lino was with him on tour in Europe, and he heard him counting, funny, skipping numbers, jumping around. And after the class, he goes, Guruji, why you count like this? and Guruji's like, what problem? He's like, you're counting like this, like from Panchadasha to Sapta, and he's like, oh, Vinyasa system is there. And Lino's like, what do you mean Vinyasa system? He's like, next time India coming, I am telling, which translates to, next year when you come back to India, Lino, I will teach you what the Vinyasa system is. And Lino's like, what is he talking about? Okay. So next year he goes back and he says, Guruji, remember last year in India, you were telling me something about Vinyasa system. You said you were teaching me. Yes, okay. So then he proceeded to teach Lino full Vinyasa for primary series, second series, and third series. Lino wasn't sure what was going on, but he's like telling him how to practice differently than he'd been telling him for the last however many years.
Wow.
And he starts paying attention and starting to understand a bit, making notes, and it was just starting with primary. He didn't really know where it was going. And then in the afternoon, when they're hanging out at the pool or whatever, they're asking, Lino, what are you doing? What are you doing with Guruji in the morning? I don't know, he's teaching me Vinyasa system, I'm not sure. It's like, okay. So this went on for weeks and weeks and months, and some of the other students that had been watching it, they decided that they were going to play along, and so they start trying to do the same thing that they saw Lino doing every day, and Guruji say, hey, no, not correct, no. Mm-hmm. He chose to teach just Lino, for whatever reason. First series, second series, then third series, over months. And Lino tells stories how when he was making the notes about it, because he had said to him after they finished third series, Guruji said, okay, basta. Or Guruji didn't say basta, Lino said basta. He said, okay, finish. Now you make a book.
Wow.
And so Lino had to really kind of refine his notes, and he said he was always going and asking Guruji, because one day he would say one thing, another say another thing, it wasn't really clear, and it could change organically. And so he was always keeping track. Is it 15 vinyasas or 16 vinyasas? Do I count this vinyasa, or is this an extra breath, or I not count this vinyasa? Is it drishti the nose, or is it drishti the third eye, or is it drishti antara, or is it brahmadya? It's the sky to the third eye to the nose. And sometimes he would be changing it. So Lino says, what I would do is whenever he said something twice, I would make a note of it. And then I'd ask a third time, until he said the same thing a third time, then I'd circle it, and that's what's going in the book. So you can see, because of that kind of thing, different people from different times will say Nasagra, Brahmadya, different ideas about vinyasas, different ideas about dristis. But something had to go in the book.
Lovely. A few things that I really don't give much of my energy to, but it seems others do. For whatever reason, it's not hitting me like it needs a lot of energy. Like when people are taught dropbacks and then TikToks, and do you have to have dropbacks before you move to a different series? This sort of thing. Do you have any comments on that? Like it used to be one way and now it's a different way.
That's definitely something that changed as well. Different when he had just a few people in the shala versus when the shala was full, versus when it was one group, another group, versus when he was there from 5 o'clock till 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
And is this Guruji, Sharati-ji?
Guruji, yeah. For me, Guruji is Pattabhi Joyce, and it was later that Sharati became Guruji as well to the latest generations. But Pattabhi Joyce changed based on whether he was in the original shala, whether he was in his own bigger shala, how many people. So it has to change. Something is like that, because you can't get to everybody at the same time. So in the original shala, everybody got dropped back, and and reach towards their, touching their feet or touching their ankles or holding their shins or wherever they were. That process was for everybody. Intense, deep, scary. And when he was teaching in the shallow with 90 people, not everybody got to do drop backs, period. Okay, not everybody everybody that did get drop back didn't get so much time and energy. So some people, would wait for a while to see if, either Sharat or Guruji would come over, and they're like, okay, it's gonna be too long. I'm just gonna finish on my own. So that's something that changed, and I'm sure it continued to change, after I stopped going to Mysore as well. How you saw it, with Sharat, and then I guess I never experienced this, but I know and understand. I've heard stories that, other Westerners started to teach in the room as well, assisting and adjusting people. So, it became very different, where it was always just Guruji and Sharat, or Guruji, Sharat, and sometimes Saraswati, Guruji's daughter, Sharat's mother, and then maybe even once in a while his other granddaughter from Bangalore. What was her name? Sharmila. Mm-hmm. Sharmila, but it was always like a family affair, so to speak. And so as it grew, and more people, some of the students that I guess Sharat chose were worthy of being able to be assisting in the shala, including yourself. Yeah. So that's something that changed as well. So I suspect that was very good for all the students that weren't getting as much adjustment and attention. So that the newer community probably appreciated that, and maybe the older community didn't appreciate that. Well, I don't want anybody except for the guru or the guru's, touching me. But again, things change.
Change is difficult.
Yeah, some people change is difficult. Yeah, but change. I think if we can see change as good, one way or another, and even if we're in conflict with it, and say, what, I prefer it the other way, or I don't like. This is not my first choice, but if it's not something that I can change or make a different choice because I'm not kind of in favor of that way or that system or that place, then I just have to accept it. And then things get easier.
Awesome. Do you have anything you want to say about your weekend coming to Charlotte, Y2 Yoga?
Yeah, we're doing lots of Ashtanga stuff. We're doing the full vinyasa discussion and the full vinyasa practice on Sunday morning. We're doing second series class. I think that's Saturday morning, right? Or Friday morning? Friday morning we're doing the second series, which I teach in a more accessible way. Kind of merges some of the traditional intention of Ashtanga, Nadi Shodhana and nerve purification, second series, and this sequencing of little mini sequences of the poses that help people have a better understanding of how to approximate the pose, move deeper into the pose, have more chance to experiment with some parts of the pose, even if they can't get into the full pose. So it's more accessible to people that are not necessarily hardcore Ashtangis, and the people that are hardcore Ashtangis, it'll help them have some light bulb experiences understanding the pose better themselves.
Sure.
Not only for their own body practicing it, but if they're helping other people to understand the pose, to teaching people the pose. We're also doing some Gannon Power Vinyasa Yoga, which is a system that I created with the intention of doing the opposite of Ashtanga Vinyasa Yoga in all the ways, so that I could really have a clear outlet, okay, I continue to use the classical, traditional Ashtanga Vinyasa Yoga system the way that I used it. No need to change anything about it, because I have this Gannon Power Vinyasa Yoga system that is clearly inspired by many, many years of drinking the Ashtanga Kool-Aid and nothing else, but does all the things that allows the practice to be different and more dynamic, like music and more organic sequences, and giving people an opportunity to approximate the poses, and starting with breath work, and so all things that are that we always use as rules and restrictions in the Ashtanga system. I wanted to make sure that when I developed the Gannon Power Vinyasa Yoga system, whenever I decide, okay, how should we do this? Whatever is the opposite of Ashtanga. So I could have nice. An opportunity for all the things without having to change. I didn't feel a need to just say, oh, this is kind of Ashtanga, but not that you want Ashtanga, this is an Ashtanga. You don't want Ashtanga, this is going to kick your ass just as much or more. Some people feel the Ashtanga is harder. Some people feel the Ganapar Vinyasa yoga is harder. And a lot of people do both, and they enjoy doing both. So we're going to do killer arm balances, which is a Ganapar Vinyasa sequence. We're doing some Ganapar breathwork, long form, 1.5 hour, 2 hour breathwork session, I believe. And that gives us an opportunity to do some of the classical pranayamas that I learned in India that are part of the Ashtanga system as well, because just like there's 6 asana series in Ashtanga, there's 6 pranayamas in the Ashtanga pranayama system. So we'll do some of those as well as some of the more contemporary breathing that's more intense. And we're also doing an opening your lotus, elements of sitting, which is a practice that I created many years ago is a tool for Ashtanga. It was basically created for myself when I was my first few years in Ashtanga, like dealing with my ankles and my knees and my hips and my low back, all the parts of my body that were very tight and supported, because I grew up playing sports. So all those joints had to be really like strong for high impact. So it took a lot of work and discipline for me to kind of get into things like lotus and marichasanas and baddha konasana, and lots of crying with Patali Joyce in that original shala where there was only 12 of us at a time, with him pushing and standing on me and saying, "Michael, why crying?" And things like this. So I used to sit in the afternoon at the pool working with my ankles and my knees and my hips in different ways and different poses. Some of them were the same poses that we do in Ashtanga, some of them were some different things that we really didn't get a chance to in Ashtanga. And I would create these sequences to help me soften up my ankles, my knees, my hips, and my low back. And I started doing them more and more and more, and I started feeling that it would help. And then people started seeing me doing, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm doing this, I'm trying to open up my lotus because it sucks." And they started doing it with me, and then I eventually, while I was teaching, I started sharing it when I was teaching, and then it became a DVD and video on demand and all the things. So I teach it when I go on workshops. And Ashtangis like it because it gives them an opportunity to practice with less yang, more yin. It's all on the ground. It's moving through seated poses much longer, slower, and deeper. I shouldn't use the word yin because one time I said at the beginning of class, "Oh, we're going to do a yin-based practice now." And after the end of practice, somebody said, "That was fan-fucking-tastic, but there was nothing yin about it." Because it's hardcore, it's intense. So it's intense in a different way. Yeah, and then we're doing something that's kind of really outside of the norm for yoga, asana like this, Ashtanga and the likes, which on Thursday night at 6 p.m. we're doing something that I created called an active energetic anatomy meditation, where we do some of the practices that I learned from spending time at the Osho International Meditation Resort, kind of to shake up some energy, get the Kundalini moving and the breath moving. We start with some seated breath work, and then we move right up with that energy to move that same energy through the body from the floor into the Muladhara, through the rest of the body. Some shaking and some jumping and some dancing, kind of free-flowing dancing with music. And then we immediately sit down, or you stand and just be still standing, rooting yourself either in feet or tail, and then we do like a 30-minute guided energy chakra meditation.
Fantastic.
So it's really fun. I find that people that are used to doing so much structured asana, whether it's Ashtanga or Bikram or some other type of vinyasa-based practice, they really enjoy that because they can get to move more freely, no rules. They can just shake it out.
Such a good time.
Yeah,
Such
fun.
good vibes.
We did it last year too, didn't we?
We sure
it was a
did.
blast.
Awesome.
So yeah, those are the things that we're doing. And we still have 2 more days of Mysore, so Thursday and Friday morning with the traditional, very pure, boring but powerful Mysore. And for some people that's all they want to do. They're not interested in other, they want to do their practice their way and get there pushed and adjusted and supported in the practice. And I love doing that as well.
Awesome.
As do you.
I do indeed.
Yeah.
We're so glad you're here, and thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank
Have a
you,
little
Mira.
chat.
Yeah.
One of many, I hope,
Yes.
in the future.
We should do this more often, this kind of
Agree.
podcast long form.
We can do that.
Yeah.
Technology.
Technology.
The little
Okay, I love you,
conjure
Johnny.
thing. I love you, Michael Gannon. Aw.
Shanti out.
Okay. All I know to do is unplug
Yeah, I was gonna
everything.
say, you know how to stop it.
Is this my ratchet? I will turn the. Oh, I hope that is.
Do you know how to stop this?
Don't. We'll just hope for the best and maybe the red button.